What's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel, and we're here for another episode of Paranormal Storytime. I would like to address that if there is a little bit of lighting change, that is because I am not only using the light inside this room, but also from outside. So the sun is setting right now. It is almost 6. Yeah, the sun is setting, and if there's lighting changes, that's why. This story that I have for you guys today is one that I have been dying to tell you. Actually, when I first got inspired to do Paranormal Storytime, I automatically came to this story, and this is not too far off in the past either. These events were actually pretty current as these events could get, and so yeah, if you guys do not believe in the paranormal or anything like that, I am not suggesting that this is what you must believe, and that I am not trying to convince you guys otherwise if you do not believe in stuff like this. You believe whatever you want, and if you're just here for the stories but don't actually think these are ghosts or paranormal things, that's fine. One thing I never told you guys in the other of my paranormal story videos, which is something I feel like I should have really started with, is that I didn't really start having experiences until I was maybe 17 or 18. And if you do watch a lot of my videos, maybe there was one time that I had an experience when I was 13, but that was about it. I never had experiences like this until I was 18. I think that had a lot to do with how skeptical I was and not believing in anything for most of my life. So when I did start developing my spiritual self, which there will be a story on, there will be a backstory. You guys have been asking for what happened behind the scenes of the witch house story, so I'm going to come out and say that one. That has a lot to do with my spirituality developing. That will be coming in the near future. But yeah, I never really had paranormal experiences until the witch house, which is why it was so memorable for me, because that was the real intense one for me that started it all. Then it began with my dad's house and so on. So I feel like once I became spiritual, I became an empath. If you guys don't know what an empath is, it is someone who feels things very deeply. And putting it in my own words, I can feel other energies, whether it comes from a physical human being or a very not physical entity. I am very sensitive to those things. I especially think this has a lot to do with why I seclude myself from people a lot, and always being around a lot of energies can really drain me. So I do things to re-energize myself by staying alone, and I guess that can be considered part of my introvert self. So, saying that, I am finally ready to tell you guys the very real, the very scary, the very extreme experiences I have had in this one house that I moved into with my mom. And if I wasn't a believer before, I was definitely a believer now. Because of moving into this house, I feel so much less scared of anything else. This house literally broke me. It broke my fear. It toughened me up, basically. And there's so much things that happened inside this house that this experience, this paranormal story, is going to be broken down into 2 parts, you guys. 2 parts. There is quite a bit to tell about what happened in this house with several different people, including me, and it would just be way too long of a video to simply put into one. So part 2 will come next week, but let's start with the beginning. It starts with my mom and a guy she was dating at the time, her boyfriend, and they were becoming very serious. So they had decided to move in with her boyfriend's mom inside of their house. And this was because she was sick and he wanted to take care of her. And since my mom was, I think my mom was engaged actually to this guy, and because they were so serious, of course my mom was gonna go with him. So it was my mom, this guy, and his mom. Well, I think only a matter of 2 or 3 months of them living in this house, his mom passes away. And I believe it was very hard on him. I'm not sure who is the one who found this old lady. I think it might have been my mother. But they found her unresponsive. She was already very sick. She passed away inside the house, inside the room that later on became my mom's room. So very quickly following, my sister and my 2 nieces had moved in with my mom and her boyfriend, which to them was fine because that was my mom's family and it was going to become his family. And they did have 4 bedrooms, so there was quite enough room. The guy that my mom was engaged to was actually a veteran, and he had some problems in the past with mental health issues, such as PTSD, which is actually very common with veterans. While my sister and my nieces were living there with my mom and him, they had told me that they had experiences with him becoming suicidal and also having to deal with very, very bad PTSD symptoms that I do not really want to get into. I feel it would be too personal to speak of because it does involve my mom. And eventually he actually moved out of the house and went to go get help. But he let my mom live inside the house with my sister and my 2 nieces. This house, as you can imagine, was already very heavy due to his mom passing away inside the house and his PTSD acting up. The house was already pretty heavy. And this is where I come into the story. At this time in my life, I am living with my dad, but some problems did arise, and I guess to them it felt like it was time to go live with my mom. My parents always had this thing where I'd live with my mom, I'd live with my dad, I'd live with my mom, I'd live with my dad. If you have divorced parents, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yes, at this time I was already enrolled into college. I was already on my path to becoming a better spiritual me, and I was doing very well. Once I moved to this house, I had a huge setback. When I moved into this house, I had slowly but surely begun to develop my depression again, and my anxiety started skyrocketing. You guys, I thought I had all this under control because of the things my school was teaching me, how I would meditate, I would practice having my depression and anxiety under control. But when I moved into this house, I couldn't control my anxiety, I couldn't control my depression. It was just so terrible. Now, Do I think the house had anything to do with it? Absolutely. This house had such an eerie vibe. The atmosphere was, I can't even describe this atmosphere. I guess heavy would be a good word. I guess you could say this house felt like there was so much more to it. This house felt like there was something else going on. That's what this house felt like. Now, before I talk about what happened when I lived there, I want to tell you guys a story about when I went to go babysit my nieces once before I actually moved in. So, my mom and my sister were busy, or they were going out or something like that, and they had asked me to babysit my nieces at this house. I don't know if you guys saw, like, to me, babysitting my nieces is no problem. I love taking care of them. But it was at this house, and I wasn't living there yet, and I didn't like it already. I recall that night I would babysit them. I did not like staying inside the house. I felt very, very trapped, very enclosed. It felt tight in there. And I asked my nieces if they wanted to go to the backyard and just hang out there. And we did. We took a couple pictures, and they were being silly. We were having fun. And then it started getting late, so they got tired. And I took them to my mom's room, which is the room where the old lady had died just months before. And they fell asleep there because she had a really big bed. I remember that night I felt a little depressed in there, which was weird because I wasn't even living there. I never felt like this even at my dad's house at around that time after all of that other stuff had happened. It was just harder for me to be happy in that location. And that night my nieces were asleep, and it felt very weird inside the room. It felt very weird. Something was wrong in there. Something was very wrong. And it took me a while to fall asleep, but I finally fell asleep. I guess that night my mom and sister had decided to stay out very late because they were not back by the time I woke up. So when I fell asleep and I woke up at 3 in the morning. And if you guys know, 3 in the morning is a witching hour. There was a certain point in my life where I was waking up at 3 in the morning every night. And then once this significant event passed, it never happened to me again until this night. So when I woke up very, very terrified. Not because of the time, but because of the dream I had. To sum it all up, the dream I had in this house was a bunch of people screaming and falling down what seemed like a vortex into a hole. And maybe that doesn't sound so scary when I say it like that, but the hole was very dark and everything seemed like disaster. It just seemed like disaster and negativity and depression and people suffering, and even me. We were all falling into this black hole at the bottom. And to me, when I woke up, what that felt like is what I guess you can say hell. Fast forward into me finally moving into this house. My energy definitely was not as high as it was becoming. My energy started lowering, meaning the way I felt, and my vibration just became lower the longer I stayed in this house. Once I moved in and I started living there longer, my energy just... I think it hasn't even been 1 year since I moved out of this house. From those of you who have been watching since some of my very first videos, my very first videos were actually recorded at this house, and I will insert a clip for you here from one of my earlier videos. Now I'm going to grab this red eyeliner pencil from Jordana, and I'm just going to run that all across my crease. I do this to put a good platform and depth for the red tones that I'm going to put in. So yeah, just kind of like draw that line all across your crease. I moved out of this house in February, and then you guys saw me in a new location, which was my apartment, and then towards the end of this summer, me and my boyfriend moved in together into this place. So I moved twice this year, and from the first time, it was from this house. Thank God. One of the very first obvious things, besides the atmosphere of the house and the way I felt, was my room door. My room door would do this really weird thing where the knob and the door would start shaking. Now, trust me, you guys, I have tried to find logical explanations. There was a particular part of the day that this would start happening, and then sometimes it would happen at 3 in the morning, but I could never find an explanation why. My mom could not find an explanation why, nor my sister. The way this door rattled was like it was being shaken. And when me and my mom would talk about it, and we couldn't find an explanation because she knew what was going on inside the house, me and her came to a conclusion that it seemed like something was trying to get out or something was trying to go in. And this was happening only in my room door. No one else's door ever did that. No one. Not my mom's, not the 2 other restrooms, not the front door, not my niece's room, not my sister's room, only my door. So if you guys can imagine how unsettling it was to live inside this goddamn room, it was so freaky. And at one point, I remember it scared me because I was asleep and it started happening at 3 in the morning and it woke me up. I hated that. I hated when that happened. I really did. Sleeping at night inside this room was hell for me. I remember I had a really good sleep schedule. I have had insomnia for my whole life, as far as I can remember. And finally, I had a sleep schedule when I was with my dad. I had got a pattern of going to sleep early, waking up early. And when I moved inside this house, that all went to shit. It really did. So I think it was hard for me to sleep at night because I always felt like something was watching me. If I had the lights off and I was laying down in my room, I felt like directly in front of me at the corner of my closet door and the room door, which you will see in one of my videos, I felt like something would stand there and just be watching me sleep. That was very unsettling. You guys have no idea the many nights that this bothered me. It really bothered me. It did not make me feel good at all. Eventually, I went to my mom and my sister and I started to bring it up, like, do you guys think this place is haunted or something? Because there's just all kinds of things wrong with this place. And then they tell me, oh yeah, have you heard about what the girls have seen? And I'm just like, what? Seen? Like, there's more that's been happening in this house. Like, thanks for telling me, like, maybe a month later after I move in. But yeah, they didn't really explain it well. One night, when I was taking care of my nieces, I was like, well, I will just hear it straight from the source. I will ask my nieces. They are very smart, intelligent little girls, so they know how to communicate. They know how to describe exactly what they saw. And I asked them. So, Grandma says you guys saw something walking in front of your room. What was that about? Can you tell me what happened? I asked both of them, and they both saw the same thing. And this is probably why we had trouble with them sleeping alone in the room. Now, before I tell you guys what they told me, I'm going to kind of try and lay out what the house was like. You walk into the living room, and then there is a long hallway, and the first place that this hallway goes is to the kitchen, towards that way, and then it is the main bathroom, which my sister and my nieces shared. And then you can go that way to go to my mom's room, which had another restroom that me and her shared. And then directly in front of this hallway was my niece's room. Then there was another little hallway, and at the end of this hallway was my sister's room. And across my niece's room was my room. So my room was behind a closet in that hallway where the first restroom was at, and across from their room. And their room was looking out towards that hallway and that restroom. So it was a house with a lot of rooms, closets, and restrooms. They told me that one night they were trying to sleep and they saw a couple of people walking, coming out from the closet and going into the restroom. Not one, a couple of people, what they described to be a family. A whole family. They saw a man, they saw a woman. Oh, that was scary. My fridge just made a noise. And they saw 2 children. My older niece was telling me this, and my younger niece went on to say, yes, that's what she saw too. And my smaller niece, I don't think was completely aware that this was a normal. So she was kind of like, yeah, the kids, and their mommy and daddy. So they saw a whole family walk in front of the room, from the closet to the restroom. Now, this closet is back to back with my room closet. My room is behind this closet. Let's take a mental note of that right now. I did end up having another sleep paralysis episode inside this house. It was the early morning. I was trying to wake up, and there was something coming up from my bed and trying to grab me. It was going to crawl on top of me and try to get me. These are just the beginning stories of what later turned into more visual stories and crazier experiences. Later on, in part 2 of the next video I'm going to make of this house, the old lady comes into play. Things got worse. Things got much worse. More people were involved. More very bad and dangerous experiences happened inside this house. I hope you guys stick around next week to find out what happened inside this house. This is kind of crazy for me to talk about. I feel like this house really kind of traumatized me, but you know, Hasn't even been a year since I actually lived there. But yes, if you guys like these kinds of videos, please like it and let me know that you're into it. And if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Click the notification bell to be notified when my next upload is. And I will see you guys for my next video. Bye!